Welcome to the Healers Café, the number one show for medical practitioners and holistic healers to have heart to heart conversations about their day to day lives while sharing their expertise for improving your health and wellness. So, welcome to the Healers Café. And today I have with me Kamini Wood. And she's an entrepreneur, an author, a podcaster, and founder of the Live Joy Your Way coaching company. In her client work, she focuses on helping high achievers overcome imposter syndrome, release trauma, comes together, breaking through limiting beliefs, and rediscover their authentic, joyous relationship with themselves. So I was looking through a bit of your stuff, and a lot of it is really about the authentic self. And who is that? So I'm definitely going to go down that road. But first of all, welcome, and also what drew you into this field to start with?
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to, share this space with you. So I really appreciate it. And I just want to say thank you for that. For me, it was not a linear path of entering into this space. I actually was doing the business world stuff. I ended up starting off in the .com industry as a project manager and was running a project management office. But really what ended up leading me to this path is motherhood, if I'm going to be completely honest. And what I mean by that is through being a parent, I saw mirrored back to me how I was showing up in this world as a people pleaser, my perfectionism really taking hold, me holding myself back, that imposter syndrome that I coach on. And so when I saw my children starting to mirror that to me, I recognized I needed to take a hard look at where that was coming from, do that self work. And through that process, recognized that actually my calling is to help other people. I've always been drawn to being with people and just I'm an empath by nature. So I always have been drawn to how can I help? How can I serve? How can I see you grow? Even in the work that I did in the business world, every time I was drawn back to the people. What is it that you need to be successful? What is it that you need to grow and evolve? And so through my own self journey, self development journey, I was brought into this world. And that's when I realized that this is the path that I wanted to take. And so for the last 8 years, I've been running my practice, working with people one to one.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, it's funny how it often is something in our lives that lead us ultimately to want to share, what we've learned through our own lessons, right?
Oh, absolutely.
So let's jump into authentic self because, I have seen that word used, abused, and
Fair,
and
fair. That's a very fair point.
and it's like, which is the authentic self? So why don't you define it a little bit and maybe its importance to you and the work you
Mm,
do?
mm. The way that I define the authentic self is the part of it's well, first of all, it's a capital S self, and it's the self that is aligned with your core values, your core needs, and a true compassionate understanding of those things and what your beliefs are about self. And that for me is who you are because so often we are taking on beliefs, thoughts, other people's values, other people's needs. We take them on as our own and we lose track of who we are as our own individual person. So when we lean into that authentic self, we're really being true and honoring those values that are ours as well as those needs that are ours.
Because I don't know, in the marketing world, like I run a college called Bowen College. And in my practice, I never thought about marketing. It was word of mouth and it just grew and grew and grew. And it was crazy. But when it came to teaching, one of the methodologies I use called Bowen therapy, it was all about how do you get it out to people in the world. And they say, well, you have to be your authentic self. And it's like, wait a minute here. Like, what is that? So they would say, well, you can wear makeup. Some people would say, um, if that's what you like, or don't wear any because that's way more natural, right? So
Mhm.
anyway, and and I've wavered on like, what a stupid thing. How could this be so meaningful? Like, what's going to come out of my mouth is going to be what is real. But when you're in circumstances that are sort of forced, that are not natural, like, like telling people about a program you don't know if they're interested or not. Eventually they might be, but you're doing something unnatural.
Mhm.
Where does authentic come in your mind?
That's such a great point because I do think that when we're doing something that's unnatural, we're in a place of discomfort, right? And so we're trying to figure out how to become comfortable in this place of, well, this seems new. And so for me, authentic comes in again. I go back to, well, what are my values and what are my beliefs in terms of what's meaningful to me? Because to your point, I mean, even being an entrepreneur and running my own practice, that marketing part of it was definitely not something that I was used to doing, and it felt very unnatural. So how could I, the question for me was always, how do I show up as my authentic self, as who Kamini is? And for me, it goes back to what you were also saying about, well, I'm going to say what is true for me. And then I'm going to allow people to either who align with it to join in, and the people that don't align with it, they're not meant to work with me, and that's okay. So part of it for me was also, yes, aligning with my values, aligning with what I believe. And then also a part of it is releasing that attachment to other people's perceptions, judgments, or validations. And that's how we come back to the authentic self.
Right, and that applies very much so in the some of the work you do, obviously, in relationships and coming out of abusive relationships. And as you were mentioning, being a people pleaser, or you're walking on eggshells because you're afraid of the reactions of another, right? But
Oh,
that's why
yes.
I found it interesting. You're also you name yourself also an entrepreneur, right? And a lot of people in the health coaching
Mm-hmm.
industry in general don't include that as a descriptor. And
Mm-hmm.
and that's why I'm asking you all these questions, because I think it's, we all have to do that part, right? So what is the part of us that, you know, does the courageous step, or do you go out and say, oh, I really don't like Facebook and all this crap. But if you're still here, you know, like, do you become like, the clown? I mean, like, I have a clown aspect of me. So, I mean, that's what people say, but I think it's true. If I'm not comfortable, I'm going to resort to some sort of mockery, or, and it can be demeaning as well, which isn't very useful because psychologically, that's not what I'm actually very
Mm-hmm.
confident, and, all of this.
Sure.
But if you're doing something that you're not aligned with, but that is necessary or feels necessary,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that's where authentic is really an I find that we need different words, it's like,
Mm-hmm.
in a relationship, I've done a lot of relationship counseling with people, and I go, now I'm finally in a relationship where I can just say what I want.
Mm-hmm.
And so is that what it means, and what if what you want to say is totally mean and horrible? Like, is that, are you, you know, are you now finally authentically being a jerk? Like, where do we, like,
Where do we draw the line?
where do we draw? And I wanted to explore that. I don't know if that's a subject of
Yeah.
interest to you, but
No, it's a great question, I think. And I do think that people struggle with this, right? Because if I'm authentically a jerk or I'm authentically upset with
yeah,
somebody, where do I draw the line in my communication of that? And so
exactly.
my sort of the way that I play with that is authentic doesn't necessarily mean I need to go outwardly and prove my authenticity to somebody else. A
Right.
lot of times it's also to your own self. So for instance, if somebody you have some not nice things to say, being authentic of what those true thoughts and feelings are, you can do that with yourself. So we can draw the line with, and I also, like for me, I have a value of, being kind. So I'm going to figure out a way to communicate my disapproval for how that person is acting. But for me, I'm authentically honest with myself saying, wow, that person is a real jerk and I don't want anything to do with them. So that's how I would play with it. Meaning, I do believe that being authentic doesn't necessarily mean we have to go and spread it out to the entire world. Being authentic is an inside job, because so often, and especially the work that I do with people recovering from toxic dynamics and toxic relationships, that's the piece that I've learned that you lose track of is, who am I? What matters to me? What are those needs? And so if we're being authentic, and another word that I use a lot is aligned, if I'm in alignment with myself, then I just really need to be true to myself. And then I can be discerning as to how I communicate that with other people.
Because I read your article where you connect to empathy and resilience,
Mhm.
right? And that's another interesting component of this, right? Because an empath will feel more, but
Mhm.
part of empathy, the way you're describing it, is also the ability to control what, because of your ability to feel others, to control
Mhm.
how you are going to express yourself,
Yes. Yes.
right?
And to that point, yes, it's that. And also, I would say utilizing boundaries, meaning I can take in, I can absorb, and also I can be aware of how much I am absorbing, have those boundaries, and be boundary with how I communicate to others.
Mhm. So, I
Yeah.
mean, so in a sense, the core value in the communication skill has got to be, it's something higher than saying the truth, for example, right?
Yep.
Or caring so much about how they feel that you're walking on eggshells, right? So it's really
Hmm.
discerning what the higher value that really is true to you.
What would your life be like if you were pain free? If you were one of the millions who suffer from chronic pain, the thought of just one day without it may seem impossible. This is often because conventional medicine tends to fall short in the treatment of pain, opting to prescribe pills or recommend surgery rather than getting to the root cause of the problem. But if you are suffering with emotional or physical pain, there is hope. Join the founder and CEO of Bowen College, Manon Bolliger, live online for your body-mind reboot. Learn how to listen to your symptoms and get to the root cause of your pain. Plus, be trained in basic Bowen therapy moves so that you can reboot your body for optimal health. You don't have to live in pain. You can heal. Stop the pain pill cycle by visiting www.yourbodymindreboot.com to learn more and to register.
And that's, I think, the complicated part of it. Because, for instance, I will say that I have a value of compassion and I have a value of integrity. And they could be almost at odds with each other when we're talking about communication, because I want to be compassionate and I also want to be in integrity. But that's that discernment piece of, can I still have compassion within the integrity of which I decide to communicate? So for me personally, I try to lean on Marshall Rosenberg's nonviolent communication, which keeps it more centered on the I, not the you in the situation. However, having said that, when we have competing values, it is true that sometimes one might trump the other one. And for me personally, to learn how to break the pattern of walking on eggshells, I had to lean further into integrity and maybe more truthful communication rather than compassion. Because if I leaned further into compassion, that would lead me down the path of eggshell walking, which I did for many, many years. And so
Yeah,
that was part of that give and take for me.
yeah, I can relate to that too. I think eggshell was, just because I understood the trauma that another person lived,
Mhm.
it made me feel compassionate, but
Mhm.
therefore I thought, well, this is not the battle worth fighting. This is not the stance worth making. So you're
Mm.
constantly negotiating your right to be you, right?
Yes,
You know,
yes, absolutely.
right?
Yes. I mean, that's very well stated. I love how you just said that. You end up renegotiating with yourself that right to really be yourself because you're overcompensating potentially for the other person, what you know of what they've gone through.
Yeah, and that's what compassion the downfall of compassion. If you didn't have compassion, you just say it. I mean, things
Mhm,
might break up faster or come to a head faster, but
mhm.
the skill of this, compassionate being can be a huge detriment to your ability to really be your authentic self and just be who you are and be free. And having lived both, I know
Mhm,
it's
mhm,
very different, right? When you're just fine, and
mhm.
if you say something a little bit like, wow, I can't believe that came out of my mouth, then that's exactly what I'd say. And it's like, wow, I haven't said that I haven't dared to say a feeling like this in years. And
Mhm.
that's actually cool. And if the person is
Oh, yeah.
mature and is like, okay, and it's not personal, right? Like
Yes.
that's the other part is learning that it's not about you. It's not personal, you know?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. It's not personal. Again, that is such an important point. I want to not miss it. Is it's not about you.
Mm.
It's about, and a lot of times we make it about ourselves or we make it about taking responsibility for the other person's response or reaction. And that's the piece again that we have to somewhat release that attachment. We're not responsible for how they respond or react to something. To that point of being a jerk, if we do say it really rudely and meanly, we have some responsibility and maybe their hurt feelings. But ultimately, the ultimate response of how how they take what we say has to be the other person's. And I believe that that's where a lot of eggshell walking comes into play too, where there's so much attachment to that responsibility that you're constantly measuring. Can I say this? Should I say this? And then we step back from it because we're really trying to control how the other person feels and responds. And that's not within our domain in the first place.
No, that's being in somebody else's business, as
Exactly.
Byron Katie would say.
Yes, exactly. Get out of their business.
There's enough to deal with yourself. So
Exactly.
tell me a little bit about I don't know that sort of highlights of or tools that you use to help people. I mean, consciousness is a big thing to become aware of all of these
Mhm,
dynamics.
mhm.
But what have you found to be helpful or a methodology that you can sort of explain a little bit so people have a sense of the work you do and how to work with you?
Yeah. Yeah. I've really, for my framework, it's really about starting with, really recognizing and becoming aware, as we've talked about, right? That recognition and aware of what are those beliefs in the background? What are the stories I've been telling myself is step one. And then you go into starting to identify what your actual values are and what your needs are. A lot of us talk about core values, which is, I say that they're ground zero. The other part that we really have to talk about are those needs, because so often we don't pay attention to what we really need, especially in relationship. We just we'll brush, we'll it's a broad stroke. Well, I need somebody who loves me and listens to me. Yes, but let's get deeper. What are the actual needs that we have and get really specific? When we can identify those things, so we recognize, we become aware, we identify it, and then it's about values-based action. Now, how can I start taking action, living into those values? And I say this in context of, even we were talking about eggshell walking. For me personally, recognizing and becoming aware of the stories I was telling myself about conflict avoidance, the stories around, I have to make sure everybody else is happy, the people pleasing. I have to make sure that, people aren't upset with me because everything has to be perfect, my perfectionism, right? Becoming aware of all those stories. Then coming back to, okay, who is Kamini really? What's actually meaningful to me? And what do I actually need when I'm in these relationships? And then learning to take that action of starting to speak up. And it's not like you go in and you start saying all of the truths, but we find little ways that we can little steps that we can take so that they can compound to make the larger change that we're looking for.
Yeah, no, well said. Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, so what is the like so how do you work with people then? It's like one-on-one and then they journal, or how do you get them to, or do you do
To
any
put it into
help?
practice. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've been trained in several modalities, and I'll tell you why. Because originally I would lean more on the cognitive side of things, meaning more of the cognitive behavioral type coaching, and it works wonders for people. So people who are can journal and are very adept to that. Journaling is a powerful thing because when we can see our thoughts out on paper, it gives us space between us and the thoughts, and we release that over identification with them. However, with other people who might be struggling because they're so stuck in their thoughts, there's also the somatic side, right? So a lot of the work that I can do as well with clients is, okay, let's drop down into the body. What are we feeling? Where are we feeling it? And this works really well with anxiety because so often we want to get rid of anxiety, but you can't outthink your anxiety. If you could, you would have done it already. So
Yeah.
instead it's, let me understand, what is my body telling me, and then work from the bottom up approach. So there's different ways that I can work with people because truthfully, we're all different, and we all assimilate information differently. We're going to integrate it differently. But yes, in terms of tools, I find that journaling is really helpful. I really encourage actually voice memos, believe it or not, because when you can witness your own self, you speak and then you witness it. At the end of the day, most of us want to be seen, right? Humans want to know we matter. We want to be accepted and belong, and we want to be heard and seen. And so being able to witness our own self is a really amazing tool that I found with my clients as well, that being able to use voice memos, witness yourself, and then reflect on it has been really, really transformational.
Interesting. Yeah. And in the somatic work, how do
Mhm.
you work with that? Like an example.
So for instance, I'll just use the anxiety for instance. I'll use myself as the guinea pig. So like for me, I check in with myself and I recognize like, I'm feeling anxious and I feel it in the pit of my stomach. And then I would work with somebody and say, okay, describe that feeling. Tell me, how does it feel? Does it have a shape? Does it have, a denseness? We go into what that feels like to really give it form. And then through that, we start working towards, okay, what is it communicating to you? So we're working with the feeling and not the thoughts. And also if we think about why somatic works is because our body will give us that indication that something's going on quicker than our thoughts will. And I know this for my own self. I recognize now that I'm anxious well before I have the thought I'm anxious because I've become so attuned to where it sits in my body. The moment I have a feeling there, I'm like, oh, okay, let's slow down and pay attention to this.
Mhm. Yeah. So it's really hearing or connecting to the voice of the body,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but
Yes.
not just the voice of thoughts, which is what they
Right.
do. Keep talking.
Yes. They keep talking. They keep talking. They're not going to stop.
Okay. So, I mean, our time is almost up. I'm going to leave you with maybe a message you'd like to share, or you have a podcast yourself, a way that people can get maybe hold of you, or if you have anything
Yes.
on
Yes.
that level, that'd be great to share now.
Oh, absolutely. So I do have a website. It's kaminiwood.com. And one of the things that you can access via my website is a free ebook on limiting beliefs. Because as we've been talking about, a lot of what challenges us are some of the stories that we've told ourselves, or what are the beliefs that we've been carrying. And what's the truth about beliefs is that you can always shift them, right? You can shift that story and create a new belief about self. And that's a powerful, powerful thing to do. I'm also easily found on Instagram and Facebook at It's Authentic Me.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for sharing your time and wisdom, and yeah, we'll see. Hopefully, it'll catch the people who need to hear this. I really trust that you know, people connect for whatever reason, but
Mhm.
if it's public, then there are the right people that listen to the message and they're like, "Thank you for doing this." So I'm going to thank you in advance.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us at the Healers Café. If you haven't already done so, please like, comment, and subscribe with notifications on, as I post a new podcast every Wednesday with tons of useful information and tips for natural healing that you won't want to miss.